Hi, my name is Derek, and I never thought I'd be telling this story. My wife didn't just cheat on me. She betrayed me with everyone I trusted. Friends, coworkers, all of them. This is my story, from the first small crack in our marriage to the day I realized my entire life had been a lie. Before the cracks, I used to think that love was something you could build if you were just patient enough. If you worked hard, showed up every day, stayed loyal, everything else would fall into place. That's how I lived my marriage. Simple, quiet, predictable. Her name was Emily. We met at a friend's wedding 9 years ago. She laughed too loud, talked with her hands, and spilled wine on my shirt before the first dance even started. I remember thinking, this woman will ruin my peace. And she did, just not in the way I expected. For years, we were that stable couple in our friend group, the ones people came to for advice. We had a small apartment in the city, a lazy golden retriever, and a morning routine that never changed. She'd make coffee, I'd read the news. She'd talk about her students, she was a teacher, and I'd pretend to listen while scrolling through my phone. It wasn't passion, but it was ours. Looking back, maybe that's when it started. The small distance you don't notice until it's a canyon. I'd come home late from work, tired and silent. She'd already be in bed, scrolling through Instagram under the blanket. We stopped kissing before leaving for work. We stopped asking, "How was your day?" Because we already knew the answer. Fine. And then one evening, she started staying later at school. Parent meetings, grading papers, extra projects. At first, I believed her. Why wouldn't I? She'd always been responsible, reliable. But then she began to glow differently. New perfume, new lipstick, a spark I hadn't seen in years. When I asked about it, she said she was just trying to feel better about herself. I smiled and said, "You look beautiful." And she did, but something behind that beauty didn't belong to me anymore. The cracks appeared quietly. She laughed at her phone more often. She turned it upside down when I walked into the room. One night, while brushing my teeth, I saw her reflection in the mirror. She was texting, her face lit by the screen, smiling. I asked, "Who's that?" She said, "Just Lisa from work." I nodded, pretending to believe it. But I didn't sleep that night. I told myself I was overthinking, that she deserved space. That trust meant not checking her phone or asking too many questions. But the silence between us got heavier. She started spending weekends with friends. And I started drinking more wine after dinner, staring at the empty chair. Across from me, the first lie. It happened on a Wednesday. She said she had a late staff meeting. I decided to surprise her, bring dinner, pick her up, maybe remind her that we still existed. When I got to her school, the parking lot was empty. The lights in her classroom were off. I called. No answer. Half an hour later, she texted. "Meeting just ended. Heading home now." But I was already sitting in my car outside the school, watching the darkness swallow the building. When she got home, she looked surprised, almost nervous. Her hair was messy, her makeup slightly smudged. She kissed me on the cheek and said, "You're up late." That night, I didn't ask anything. I just watched her sleep. There was a small red mark on her neck. I told myself T was a rash. It wasn't the discovery. The truth rarely arrives all at once. It seeps in quietly in fragments through things that don't fit anymore. It began with a laugh. Not hers, his. A co-worker of mine, Daniel, one of my closest friends. We'd worked together for 6 years, shared beers, double dates, poker nights. One Friday, he mentioned something offhand. Man, Emily's been helping me with some stuff at school. Didn't know she was that good with numbers. I froze. Emily never mentioned working with him. In fact, she'd always said she barely knew anyone in my office except through me. But I laughed it off, because that's what you do when something feels wrong. You smile until it hurts less. That night, when she came home, I asked, "Hey, I didn't know you were helping Daniel with something?" Her eyes flickered just for a second. Then she smiled. He called me about his niece's tutoring. Nothing major. I nodded, pretending it made sense. But the air in the room changed. Over the next few weeks, more small inconsistencies appeared. She'd mentioned going out with friends, but when I asked which ones, she'd hesitate. Once I saw a man's jacket in the back seat of her car. She said it belonged to her coworker who forgot it after carpooling. Every time I told myself, don't be that husband. Don't become paranoid. Don't lose your dignity. But dignity means nothing when you start losing reality. One night, she left her phone charging on the kitchen counter. She was showering. My hands trembled when I picked it up. I didn't want to be that person. I really didn't. But curiosity and fear are stronger than pride. I opened her messages. At first, nothing. Group chats, school talk, family stuff. Then I saw one name, Mark. Another friend of mine. The chat was archived. The first message was months old. You looked amazing today. Then her reply. Stop. Someone will see. His answer. Don't worry. He never does. My heart stopped. I scrolled, and the words burned through my eyes. They had been together for months, and worse, there were mentions of others. Your friend Daniel, that night after the party, every name I knew, every person I trusted. It felt like being buried alive, only instead of dirt, it was betrayal filling my lungs. She came out of the shower, wrapped in a towel, humming softly. I put the phone back and sat on the couch, numb. She smiled at me, kissed my head, said, "You okay?" I nodded because the truth hadn't fully hit me yet. It would later that night. I went to the balcony with a bottle of whiskey and read those messages again, every line cutting deeper. They laughed about me, jokes about how he'll never find out, pictures I can't unsee. At 3 a.m., I was still sitting there staring at the sea. IT lights. The world looked exactly the same, but mine was already gone. The breaking point. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat there, phone in hand, screen dimming every few minutes, as if even it was tired of showing me the truth. When dawn came, the world looked unreal, too bright, too normal. She walked into the kitchen, hair still damp, wearing one of my shirts. She smiled softly. "You been up all night?" "Yeah," I said. "Just couldn't sleep." My voice didn't sound like mine. Something inside me had already cracked. She made coffee, hummed a tune, talked about work, about how her students were driving her crazy. Every word she said felt like a lie dressed as routine. I wanted to scream, to throw the phone at her, to demand an explanation. But instead, I just watched her, this stranger who wore my wife's face, and wondered when exactly did she stop loving me? Finally, I said it, quietly. "Who's Mark?" She froze. For a second, everything stopped, even the sound of the kettle. She looked at me like she didn't understand the question. Then she tried to smile. "Mark? From your work?" "Yeah," I said. "From my work? From my life? From your bed?" Her lips parted, but no sound came out. And in that silence, I knew. I didn't need her confession. Her face said everything. "How long?" It's not what you think, she whispered. Then tell me what it is. It was a mistake. I laughed. It sounded more like choking. A mistake that lasted how long? Weeks? Months? Because I read everything, Emily. I saw the messages. I saw them. She started crying. Said she was sorry. Said she didn't know why she did it. Said it didn't mean anything. But that's the thing about betrayal. It always means something. I asked about Daniel. She didn't answer. I asked about the others. She just stared at the floor. And in that silence, every piece of my life fell apart. My friends, my marriage, my sense of who I was, all of it gone. She tried to touch my hand. I stepped back. Don't. Please, she said. Let me explain. Explain what? How you looked me in the eye every day and lied. How you let me sit across from people who... I stopped. Couldn't finish. The words felt poisonous. You don't understand, she said softly. You're right, I said. I don't, and I never will. Then I left. I don't remember driving. I just remember the sound of my heartbeat in my ears and the weight in my chest, so heavy I thought I'd pass out. I parked near the river and sat there for hours. Didn't cry. Didn't think. Just stared. When I finally came home, she was gone. A note on the table. I'm so sorry. I never meant to hurt you. I burned it. That night, the house felt colder than it ever had. Her perfume still lingered in the sheets, and I hated that I could still love the smell. Every corner of the apartment reminded me of something. Her laugh, her voice, her touch. Everything I wanted to forget was everywhere. I poured another glass of whiskey and whispered to myself, they all knew except me. And that was the worst part. Not the cheating, not the lies, but realizing that everyone around me had been part of a story I never knew I was in. The fallout. The next few days felt unreal, like walking through fog that never lifted. I stopped answering calls, stopped going to work. I didn't want to see anyone, especially them. But betrayal has a cruel way of chasing you down. It doesn't end when you walk away. It lingers in every look, every silence. On the third day, my phone buzzed again. Daniel? I stared at his name for a long time before answering. His voice was cautious. Hey, man, haven't heard from you. Everything okay? I wanted to tell him everything, or nothing. Instead, I said, you tell me, how's Emily? The pause that followed was enough. He didn't ask, what do you mean? He didn't sound surprised. Just quiet. It wasn't supposed to happen, he finally said. You're married, Dan? I know. She said you too were. Don't finish that sentence. I hung up. That was it. The last conversation I ever had with someone I once called a friend. A few hours later, Mark texted me. Can we talk? No. I'm sorry, man. You're sorry because you got caught. He didn't reply again. I blocked them all, every one of them. Deleted their numbers, unfollowed, erased photos. But erasing people doesn't erase what they did. You can delete names, not memories. That night, I met with my brother, Ethan. He was the only person I trusted enough to tell. We sat in a bar, and I told him everything about Emily, about my friends, about how the world suddenly looked unfamiliar. He didn't interrupt, just listened, jaw tight, eyes full of disbelief. When I finished, he said quietly, you didn't deserve that. Maybe I did, I said. Maybe I was too blind, too comfortable. No, he said, you were loyal. That's not blindness. That's what they took advantage of. I nodded, but it didn't help. Because when you've been betrayed by everyone closest to you, words like deserve stop meaning anything. I went home, poured myself another drink, and looked around the empty apartment. I noticed something strange. I didn't feel anger anymore. Not really, just exhaustion. The kind that seeps into your bones and stays there. I opened the drawer where she used to keep her jewelry. Empty. Then I opened the closet. Half empty. That's when it hit me. She wasn't coming back. And for the first time, I felt both relief and grief in the same breath. She said it was a mistake, I whispered. But mistakes don't repeat. A week later, mutual friends started reaching out. Some acted shocked. Others admitted they'd heard rumors. Every word felt like another blade twisting. They knew. They all knew. I realized then that betrayal doesn't happen in isolation. It grows quietly, fed by silence, by people who see and say nothing. That's when I stopped answering anyone at all. Days turned into weeks. I stopped eating properly, slept during the day, stayed awake at night. The house became a museum of what once was toothbrushes, photos, her favorite mug. Each object, a memory I didn't ask to keep. One evening, I found myself scrolling through old pictures of us, smiling, happy, pretending. I looked at my face in those photos and felt pity. That man didn't know how fragile his world really was. I started writing. Not for her. Not even for me. Just to make sense of it all. To put the chaos into words so it would stop echoing inside my head. Betrayal doesn't break you in one moment, I wrote. It breaks you slowly every time you remember the details. And that's when I decided if I couldn't erase the paw, and I document it, so maybe someone else somewhere would understand. The collapse. Time stopped meaning anything. Days bled into each other, gray, quiet, identical. I stopped checking the clock. I stopped checking myself. It's strange how pain doesn't always scream. Sometimes it just hums, a low, constant noise you learn to live with. I'd wake up around noon, stare at the ceiling for hours, and think about nothing. Or maybe everything all at once. Food lost its taste. Music sounded foreign. Even the mirror started to lie, showing me someone I didn't recognize. One night, I got drunk alone and called Emily. She didn't answer. I called again and again. By the fourth time, I realized I wasn't calling for her. I was calling for who she used to be. I left a voicemail anyway. I don't hate you, I said, but I hate what you turned me into. Then I threw the phone across the room. It didn't break. I wished it had. The next morning, I got a message from an unknown number. Please stop. I'm trying to move on. No name. No apology. Just that. I deleted it and sat in silence. The kind of silence that presses on your chest like weight. I realized then that grief doesn't only come from death. Sometimes it comes from watching someone you love become a stranger. Weeks passed. I lost weight, missed deadlines. My boss called me in. You don't seem focused lately, he said. I laughed. Focused on what? He looked at me like he wanted to say more, but didn't. People rarely know what to say to a man who's quietly falling apart. At night, I walked through the city, hands in my pockets, just to feel movement. Lights, strangers, noise, all of it made me fey. Less invisible. Sometimes I'd stop outside bars where couples laughed and leaned close, and wonder if any of them would end up like us. Would one of them wake up years later and realize the person beside them was a lie? One evening, I found myself back near the river. Same spot where I sat the night I found out. The water moved slowly, steady, indifferent. I whispered, How do you forgive something that took everything? The river didn't answer. I stayed there until sunrise. Something about the light made me feel small, but also alive. For the first time in weeks, I wanted to breathe. That's when I realized the truth. I wasn't just mourning her. I was mourning myself, the man who trusted too easily, who believed love was enough. And maybe in some quiet way, I needed to lose everything to see who I really was without her. That night, I wrote in my journal again. Forgiveness isn't about letting them off the hook. It's about letting yourself stop bleeding. And when I read it back, it almost felt true. The echoes of her conclusion. Even months later, her presence lingered. Not physically, she was gone, moved out, vanished from my daily life. But everywhere I looked, reminders remained. The apartment still smelled faintly of her perfume. Mutual friends didn't call anymore, but their social media posts hinted at her. Dinners, trips, laughter I wasn't invited to. Every story, every photo was a ghost. I walked past the office one evening, saw her leaving with someone new. No dramatic confrontation, no shouting, just her smiling like nothing had happened. And I realized she had moved on, and so had everyone around her, except me. But I didn't hate her anymore. I didn't hate them either. I simply understood that some people are not meant to stay in your story. Some are there only to teach you what trust really means. I started running again, slowly at first, then farther each day. I picked up old hobbies, reconnected with distant relatives, focused on myself. The pain didn't vanish. It lingered, but like a scar, it reminded me that I had survived. Some endings aren't tragedies, they're beginnings disguised as loss. I still write sometimes, late at night, recording thoughts no one will ever read. Not for revenge, not for confession. Just to remember that I lived, that I endured, that I am more than the betrayal I survived. And maybe that's the only closure I'll ever need.